Hey everyone, I'm back today with another video tutorial for you all. This time we're going to be sewing the Yasmina Backpack by DEJA Designs. This backpack comes in two sizes. This is the small here, and this one is the large. I'll try to get it in the camera so you can see it. The large actually fits a binder in it. For those of you that follow me on Instagram, you'll see that I posted a picture, so it would be great for a college student or university student or even high school students who just carry around one binder. There's lots of pockets inside so they can slip their phone in here or put their phone in the back pocket. It's right against your back, so it keeps it safe. Enough spots for some pens, and then your binder will fit inside. The small makes a great purse size. Same thing as the large, has your zipper pockets inside and your slip pocket and your zipper pocket on the back. Lots of different options for this bag. So let's get started making the backpack. First thing to do is cut out your pattern pieces. For time purposes for this video tutorial, I've went ahead and I've cut and prepped a lot of my pattern pieces. In the pattern, she gives instructions for cutting it out with a ruler and rotary cutter, or there is an option for pattern pieces. I prefer to cut with a ruler and rotary cutter, so that's what I've done. If you don't print out the pattern pieces and you cut the way I did, she gives instructions for cutting out pieces such as the bottom piece that require extra pieces cut out. She gives the instructions for this with all the measurements, so not to worry, you don't need to print the pattern pieces at all. She's really good with that. The other thing I like to do with my pattern pieces is I like to label them with what the pattern piece is. I also like to mark a T so I know where the top is, and I like to mark my center markings. This just saves on some time and saves some panic when you're making the bag. You're not going and trying to measure your pattern piece out to see if you're using the correct pattern piece. It's already all labeled, so you'll notice all my pieces are labeled. Another thing I have done is I've fused my stabilizers as well. That is given in the instructions what you need to do, as well as marked any of the seam allowances. This is the bottom panel piece, so you're going to cut a stabilizer. She's going to tell you how to cut it if you use the pattern piece, or if you don't use the pattern piece, and how you attach it to the bottom piece. So just like this is how it will look when you attach it. Another thing I have done ahead is I went ahead and made one of my straps, just so that I only had one to do on camera. I'm going to show you how to do the other one, and I've also gone ahead and put the double-sided tape on these pieces and folded them all just to save on time, and I've pressed my handles. This just helps me save on a little bit of time. The other piece I did ahead of time was the zipper overlay. I cut the opening out, and again, it's labeled so I know, oops, sorry, that's upside down, so I know what the pattern piece is. And I've installed my rivets on this top band. I just went ahead and did that. That just will save me some time. While I'm doing the video, I don't have to stop and do that. So let's get started with the handle. So to make sure I follow the pattern correctly, because sometimes I like to skip ahead, I don't always do things in the exact order as the designer gives. I'm going to have the pattern open here on my computer and I'll follow along exactly. If I go too fast, or if there's something that you're not 100% sure of while you're working on the bag, please feel free to pop a message in the comments below, and I get an email notification every time somebody comments, so I'll reply right away, not to worry. If you can't get a hold of me, you can always comment in the Facebook group if you're in Facebook, and Andrea will see the comment, or message her via how she suggests in her pattern. So let's get started on some sewing. The first thing, as I said, that you're going to do is you're going to do all the prep work. As I said, I've already fused all my interfacing, I've cut out pieces, I've attached my stabilizers to my pieces that require it, and I've sewn one of my straps, sorry. So we're going to sew a strap together just so you can see the process of how this is done. So what she asks you to do in the pattern is she asks you to draw a line down the center of your strap. This, just right down the middle of the full length of the strap. Then you use your double-sided tape and you hold it down, and I use some clips because over time it does kind of loosen off and they lift up. So she has you do that. Then once you're done that, there's a couple of different options that she gives for making the strap. So I'm going to do the one option, which is taking this double-sided piece, so my cotton piece, and laying it down. Then I'm going to lay my vinyl piece down. She has you attach the vinyl piece so that it goes inside your cotton strap by 3/4 of an inch. So just like that, you can see I've marked the 3/4 inch line. So it goes in by 3/4 of an inch, it meets that line, and then you fold the cotton strap over, just like that. And then this vinyl piece will come over top of the cotton strap. Then you will pin it in place. She does have you use double-sided tape. I'm not using double-sided tape for this, just because I'm being cheap, I guess. And then you're going to, if you were using tape, you'd push it down onto the tape. I'm running low on tape, that's the other thing, so I'm trying to hoard the tape for when I absolutely need it. So you're going to pin or tape it down all along the whole length of the strap. I will mention, sometimes I do things a little bit different than the designer. This is just because it's what I'm used to, or ways that I've found to make things easier for me. There's no right or wrong way to do something. I'm going to try and stick to the pattern as much as I possibly can. I apologize if I do veer off and do something a little bit different than Andrea has in the pattern. I will try to let you know if it is done differently, just so that you're not looking at the pattern and thinking, well, Michelle, you've lost your mind. This is not how Andrea does it. I'll also be speeding up some parts of the video, because when I'm sewing, you don't really need to see those parts really. We all know how it looks when we're sewing, but anything that is important, such as construction, or such as what I'm doing now when I'm pinning, I will have it go regular speed. Again, any questions, feel free to comment in the comments below. So you're going to pin this or tape it down all the way down the strap. I keep wanting to call it a handle. All the way down the strap. When you get towards the end, you're going to repeat what you did on the first end and insert the vinyl strap 3/4 of an inch into the cotton strap. So you would have made a marking, and you're going to fold it into there. So you just take it and fold it in. Something I do is I leave this end until I'm sewing, because sometimes this tends to shift and things tend to get a little bit longer on me. So I leave it until the end. I don't do this until the end, just a personal preference, but you put it in the same way you did with the beginning of the strap by 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to go ahead and sew it. If you're using vinyl, you'll want to use a Teflon foot. If you don't have a Teflon foot, you can use a walking foot. If you have neither of those feet, you can put a piece of masking tape or painter's tape onto the bottom of your presser foot. This will help it slide across the vinyl and not stick to the vinyl. You may need to use this method for vinyl, cork, faux leather, depending on your machine. Sometimes with my machine I can get away with using my regular foot on cork and vinyls, but for this one I need to use a Teflon foot. So I'm going to sew the strap using a 3mm stitch length. I'm going to start at the top, I'm going to back stitch to lock those stitches in, and I'm going to sew all the way down to the bottom, and then when I get to the bottom, I'm going to stop. I'm going to tuck this end in, just because, like I said, sometimes it shifts and you may get it a little bit longer. I want to make sure it fits in there perfectly, and then I'm going to continue across and stitch back up. Now normally I would break my stitches down here and I'd come back up and I'd sew back down this side, but because of this type of strap, I'm not going to do that. I have done it with this strap and I didn't find I get any twisting. But if you're worried about twisting, when you get down to this end, the bottom end down here, you can sew across after you get it tucked in, back stitch, and then break your stitches, and then come back up and start sewing back up here and sew all the way back down. So I'm going to start stitching. So as you see, my strap did shift a bit, and that's fine. I'm going to tuck it in at the end anyway, so that won't matter. probably because when I was pinning, I wasn't really flattening it out enough. That's why she has you do the tape. If you're taping it, it will stick better and you won't have this shifting like I've had. So I'm at the end. I took one stitch too far, so I'm going to back up. I'm going to tuck this in. Oh, it's biting me. Let me turn this around. Didn't fight me this much on my last one. I'm going to trim this a little bit just to make it easier because it's not going in, and that's okay because nobody's seeing this. I went too far when I stitched, so you definitely don't want to stop as close to the edge as I did. As you can see, it kind of fights you a bit. There we go. Of course, while I'm on camera, this would happen. Turn the machine off. Turn the machine off just in case I accidentally hit the presser foot. I don't want to start sewing. Turn my machine back on, and I'm going to continue stitching, and as you can see, I've tucked that end in, so now I have all my raw edges enclosed. You don't see them anywhere. There's no raw edges. Snip your threads, and you're done your strap. So as you can see, you have a nice strap, double-sided. If you have another method for how you do your double-sided straps, go ahead and do that method that you're used to. There's no right or wrong way. She also has an option in the pattern for if you're going to use the strap ends. It's the metal strap ends. She has the instructions for doing that as well. You can also make your strap with one fabric. You don't need to do it double-sided, such as I did here for this pattern, or for this bag, sorry. I used the same fabric that I used for my exterior, and I just used one fabric, and this is just cut it the width. So say your hardware is 1 inch, you're going to cut your fabric 4 times the width of your hardware, then you're going to fold it in half, press it, then you're going to take the one raw edge and press it towards the crease, press the other side towards the crease, fold it all in half, and then you've enclosed all the raw edges. It's kind of like making double fold bias tape. So that's how you do that. Again, whatever method you're comfortable with for making your straps double-sided or single-sided or single straps, go ahead and do that. There's, again, no right or wrong way to do that. The next step she has us do is for the handle. So you're going to take your 2 handle pieces. Again, same thing. You're going to mark the centers. Then you're going to, if you're using cotton for one side and vinyl for the other, for the cotton one, press the fabric into the center, and then it'll cause it to be the raw edges in the center. The vinyl, you're going to use double-sided tape. Again, my double-sided tape lost its stickiness, so I had to put these clips on. And then you will clip these pieces together. She has you use tape down the center again. I'm not using tape because, as I said, I'm kind of hoarding my tape, running a bit low. So then you stick them together so that the raw edges are enclosed in the center. You see no raw edges. You want to make putting the raw edges together, and that's how it'll look. Then you're going to sew these down both sides using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, same thing as you did for your strap. For the handle, I'm going to start back up at the top, the side that I started sewing on when I sewed the other side, just because this will twist. Snip your threads, and when you're done snipping all your threads, you can put this off to the side until we need it. Next step, sorry I have to refer to the pattern because I don't really know this pattern by heart, so I'm sorry if I keep stopping to scroll through the pattern to see. As I said, I like to also jump around a pattern, so I tend to not really follow the pattern step by step, but I want to make sure I am for all of you following along so that you don't get confused. The next step is your side connectors. So I'm going to open this up so you see how mine looks inside. So I've cut the strap connector stabilizer already, and I have folded, oh, I can't get it open, of course. There we go. Folded my side connectors towards the middle. I marked and folded it towards the middle. And the stabilizer is inside. So once you've fused the stabilizer as she instructs in the pattern, you will fold these all up to meet in the center, and then you'll stitch them as she says in the pattern. So you'll stitch 1/8 of an inch away from the seam here, and then you'll also top stitch here in them as well. Again, she gives the instructions for that in the pattern. So 1/8 of an inch away from the long edge. Then you do a second line of stitching, 1/2 of an inch. So you're going to be going 1/2 of an inch away from this edge, and you're going to stitch another row of stitching 1/2 of an inch away from that edge. And you'll do that for both sides. It's going to be hard to see what it looks like on my camera because I used black thread. Sorry about that. Let's see if I can get you to see. I don't think you can really see, but I have 4 lines of stitching. So this one is 1/8 of an inch away from the long edge. Then I did 1/2 of an inch away from this long edge. So the 1/2 of an inch is there. Then 1/8 of an inch from this edge, and 1/2 of an inch again from this edge, and there's my stitching. You'll repeat that for the other strap connector. Okay, so now that we have our side connectors all sewn, don't worry about trimming off your threads. We're going to be trimming these down in just a moment. If you are using your pattern pieces, you'll want to go ahead and follow the instructions for using pattern pieces. Because I'm not using pattern pieces, I'm going to be using measurements. I'm just going to follow those steps in the pattern for where I need to do some markings. Just to note, I don't give away any measurements in my tutorials. This is just for protection of the pattern and the pattern designer. So that is why I'm not saying any, but you can find all the measurements and everything you need in the pattern if you are not using the pattern pieces. So I'm going to go ahead. Again, I'm making a small, so I need to make sure I'm using the measurements for the small connector. Another thing to note, when you're making these marks, because we have a stabilizer in here that is shaped, we want to follow the shape of the stabilizer. So when we're cutting these, we want to have it cut the same way our stabilizer is cut. So I don't want to be cutting this the opposite angle of because my stabilizer right now, I can feel it, it goes this way. I want to be making sure that I'm cutting this side connector on the same angle as my stabilizer. I hope that makes sense. So I've made my 2 marks. Again, I can feel my stabilizer in here. I can feel that it goes on this angle. So I'm going to cut my side connector on the same angle as my stabilizer. So because I made the marks here, so wherever you made your marks, you will cut from the bottom corner, oops, from the bottom corner up to where you made that mark. So just like this. Just like that. So I've cut from the bottom corner up to where I made that mark. Repeat that step or process, sorry, for the other side. And there you have your cut side connector. The next thing we need is our rectangle rings. I like to, so first I'm going to snip this thread. I can see a thread here. I like to place my rectangle ring so that the seam where the rectangle ring was joined is hidden within the side connector. Just like that. So you're going to take your side connectors, you're going to fold them in half, line up these angled edges, place a clip, and then in the pattern, she has you make marks for where you're installing your rivets. So these marks will be made between your lines. So between the line that you did that was 1/8 of an inch away, and then the one that was 1/2 an inch. So the first row of stitches and your second row of stitches right in between there. So I'm going to make my marks. Because I'm using black, I don't really have anything that's going to show up, so I'm going to use my awl to mark the little holes where I need to punch my rivets, and I'm going to use the measurements she gives in the pattern. If you're doing the large bag, there's going to be a second set of measurements you will be making on this side connector, so you'll want to pay attention to the instructions for that, because there is instructions for making 4 sets of holes rather than just 2, as I'm doing for the small. And again, they're going between your rows of stitching, right in the center of the rows of stitching. So now I am going to take my rivet press and punch the holes out on the mark that I made. So unfortunately my camera died and I didn't notice while I was punching the holes in my side connector with my rivet press. Unfortunately I had kept going before I had noticed, and only noticed because I was trying to show a close-up view to you all. So unfortunately I don't have the full video for punching my rivet holes, as that was already done, but I did punch the holes as directed in the pattern on my pieces. I'll show you a close-up view of where I did it. So you have the stitching that's 1/8 of an inch away from each edge, and then your 1/2 inch stitching. The holes are punched between those rows of stitches on both side connectors. If you're doing the large bag, she has a second set of holes that you will need to punch. As I said, I'm doing the small, so I only had to punch the 2 holes. The next step we will do is adding some of the double-sided tape. So you open up your side connector, leave your D-ring in place still. You will put a piece of double-sided tape between the rivet holes that you made inside. It doesn't need to be a really big piece of tape, you just want it enough to hold these together. Peel the backing off, stick them back together. You can use a clip, or if you're using cotton for these, you can also use a pin. So there's my tape. Fold it back together, line up the edges, pin it with a clip. Then you need to take a piece of tape, double-sided tape, and put it on the back side of your side connector. You won't be removing the tape from this just yet. You'll leave the tape on. So it'll be just like that. Now with these, you need to take your ruler, and using the measurements she gives in the pattern or the template, depending on what you're using, your pattern piece or the measurements, I'm using measurements, you're going to measure with the measurements she gives you to place your side connector onto your bottom of your bag. So I'm going to do that now. What I like to do is check and make sure that it's lined up with my stabilizer. I almost put it on the wrong side, so that's good that I check. So check to make sure that you're on the side where your stabilizer is, and I like to check that it lines up with where my stabilizer is going to be for punching my rivets in. So you're going to place that down with the measurement she gives. Then you want to take a marking tool, a pen, an awl, anything that you can, and punch right back through those first sets of holes you made in the side connector. So I'm using my awl here because a pen or a marker or whatever will not show because I'm using black material. So I've punched the 2 holes here. I'm going to go ahead and push my awl through more to make them bigger. Repeat this for the other side. So you're not taping it down just yet, you're just punching the holes. So again, repeating for the other side, punching the holes. I will find where those were, and I will punch them through more. If you're using cotton or a material that's not black like me, you'll be able to use a washable pen or marker or a Clover Choco and get in there and make the holes or the dots where the holes will go. Once you're done that, you want to, if you've marked only with a pen, you'll want to punch out your holes because I've marked with an awl. I've punched them out already. I don't need to have my rivet press again to punch out the holes. I've already made them. You're going to then install your rivets. So you'll take the tape off the piece of one of your side connectors. Take your rivet that you are using. Depending on the thickness, you may need a longer post rivet or a shorter post. So usually I like to test to see which one will work better. Push the rivet through, add the cap, and then add the second rivet. Same thing, push the rivet through, add the cap. And then you'll repeat that for the second side. Take the tape off, the backing off the tape I mean. You could put both your rivets into the side connector. And then push them both through at the same time. Again, you're going to notice I have mine labeled. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I label all my pattern pieces so that I know what they are when I get to the step in the pattern where she tells you what pieces to use. I've marked my center and what will be the top and the bottom. The bottom piece will be changed later in the pattern. It's not as important to mark the top and bottom because it's quite obvious where the top and the bottom is. So now that I have those installed just like this, I need to take my rivet press and press them down. If you don't have a rivet press and you want to use rivets, they do sell rivet tools that you can use. But the other option is Chicago screws. They're a great alternative to rivets. You don't need any tools but a screwdriver. So that's a good option for those who want to use these rivets but don't have a big press like I have, or don't have the rivet pressing tools to do the rivets. So the rivets that I've used here are 8mm rivet. Or 8mm post rivet, sorry. So I'm going to press them together. My rivet press was purchased off Amazon. I'll link it in the bottom of the video in the description for anybody who is interested. I've had my rivet press now for about 4 years. It's excellent. I love it. I've had no issues with it. It was worth every penny. I think I only paid, well, my husband only paid $70 for it at the time when we got it. So there's a close-up of how it will look with your rivets installed and the rectangle ring. Again, if you're doing the large bag, you're going to have extra rivets down here. So yours will look a little bit different. She gives all the measurements in the bag. Another thing you can do if you don't want to have your side connector solely held on by rivets, you can actually stitch right up the side of the connector, go across, and then back down, and then across here. That actually just adds a little bit of extra hold. I'm okay with rivets. I know that the rivets will hold. Alright, so our next step is to prepare our top zipper. I've gone ahead and completed mine already, so that's how the finished edges will look of your zipper. Just one end will be finished, the other end will stay like that, so raw. So I'll quickly show you. I do have a YouTube video where I show how I make my zipper ends look like this. She also instructs you how to do it in the pattern, but what you're going to do is take one end of the zipper, trying to find where you can see this. Take one end of your zipper, you're going to mark it where she says, and then you're just going to turn it. You take this piece, and I just pinch it. I don't use measurements, I just pinch, because I always feel that a long zipper tail can be trimmed in the end. So you pinch it. Again, the video on my YouTube channel will show it better because it won't be black zipper tape. So I take this piece and I pinch it and bring it down so that my fold, so you can see it's it's hard to see because I used a black zipper. I guess a black zipper wasn't the best idea. It's folded. So you can see there's a fold here, and that fold meets up with the zipper teeth here. I put a pin in it. Just like that. And then I'll stitch to hold this piece down here. So see how there's a loose piece right here? I'll stitch this down right along the edge here, 1/8 of an inch or 1/16 of an inch. I'll stitch this piece down and that'll hold it. So you'll have a folded edge right here against your zipper teeth. Again, in the pattern, she instructs how to do that with thorough, detailed instructions and pictures. So you can use that to fold your zipper end. That'll be for your top zipper only. You're not doing the other zippers that way. Then you want to install your zipper onto your other zippers. So I have a zipper helper here that I use. Again, in the pattern, she tells you and gives instructions for how to install a zipper onto zipper tape. So I put it on. I make sure I cut my zippers really straight on the edges. That way there it makes it easier for me to use this and put the zipper pull on. I have a specific rotary cutter that I use just for cutting zippers, makes it really easy. And then again, I'll show you again how I do it. I put my zipper pull onto my zipper helper. If you have one of these, they're really awesome and very handy. You can make one. Again, I have another video on my YouTube channel for how to install zipper pulls onto zipper tape, and I speak about this here as well. So I put the zipper tape into the zipper pull. I don't know if you can see, into the zipper pull, just like that. And then I try to put them in as evenly as possible so that the zipper tape stays nice and even and I don't get any waves or lumpiness. So that's what it'll look like. Again, she has the instructions in the pattern for how to do this. If you do not have a zipper helper, you can also use a clamp to clamp a zipper, a fork onto your table. So those are done. We'll put them off to the side for now. Okay, so now we need our top band piece C. We're going to go ahead and make some measurements, some marks, using the measurements she gives in the pattern. So grab your ruler and your marking tool, and the measurements that she gives are in step 68 of the pattern. So I'm going to go ahead and make these marks now on the exterior front, or sorry, the front right side of the top band. She also has you mark the center. I've marked the back of my top band center, but I'm going to put a little mark on the top, on the right side, so that I know where the center is there. Starting on step 69, she has you mark the marks for where you're going to place the rivets. The rivets are purely decorative purpose. You do not need to add these if you do not want to. In fact, one that I made during testing, I didn't add the rivets. As you'll notice, I've already installed my rivets. The rivets aren't actually installed in these steps. You're just making these marks for where you're going to place them. I went ahead for time purposes for the video and I actually just installed these rivets right now. So you will go ahead starting on step 69 and you will follow all the instructions for the measurements that she gives for this top band piece for where you're going to be placing your rivets if you're choosing to add rivets to your top band like I did. Moving on, we now need our back panel F. This is the piece that has the stabilizer here in the middle underneath. We're going to be making some markings as well for this. If you are doing the large or the small, you'll need to be mindful of the measurements she gives for each size of bag. So I'm going to go ahead and do my markings for my back panel F. So first thing she has you do is mark these top corners again. All the measurements, as I stated before, are given in the pattern, so I'm not leaving anything out, hiding anything from you. They are all given in the pattern for where you need to mark and what the measurements are that you will need. Now I am moving on and marking the next set of marks. You don't have to worry so much about using a marking tool that won't disappear later, because this is going to be covered up later on when we attach our handle and straps. So don't worry about that. This will all be covered up. So if you're using a pencil here because you're worried about like your chalk, see how it just wipes away. If you're worried about your chalk wiping away, or when you press with your iron, you're worried about those marks from your pen going away, go ahead and use a pencil. As I said, this will be covered up later. So now we're going to mark some more lines. We're marking a center mark here on the panel. So once we do our center mark, we now have some marks that we need to make to the right and to the left of this line. I'm going to get my small ruler. So your first mark will be marked to the right. And then the second mark is to the left. To the right, sorry, again. You move over again to the right, sorry. So you have both marks to the right. Your first marks are both to the right. And then you will repeat that for the left side. So one mark over from the middle mark, and then the second line is over from your center mark or middle mark as well. And you will have something that looks like this. So you have your two marks at the top, you have your line here, and then all your markings for where we're placing straps and handles later are marked here. Again, you can go ahead and use something that doesn't wipe off or wash away, because these will be covered later in the pattern when we make the bag. Next, we need our back band G. It will look like this. In step 74 and 75, she gives measurements for these marks that I already made. So you'll want to go ahead and make those marks on your back side of your, or wrong side of your back band. She then has you place some double-sided tape. She gives instructions for if you're using 1/4 inch tape or if you're using 1/8 of an inch tape. She gives instructions for both. So you'll want to follow the instructions for the size of tape that you're using. We'll remove this protective backing. And then we're going to fold the top raw edge. So this is where it's good to mark your T, or have had marked your T on your back band. And we're going to fold that top raw edge down to meet that line. That first line that we drew, not the second line, the first line. She gives the instructions for using the different sizes of tape just so that your needle doesn't get gummed up. If your needle does get gummed up from your double-sided tape that you're using, you can always take some rubbing alcohol and rub it on the needle. That'll remove any of the stickiness from the tape or anything else that has gotten onto your needle. So again, that's just a little bit of rubbing alcohol. Take the needle off your machine. Don't do this while it's on your machine, because you don't want any rubbing alcohol dripping inside your machine. So now that we've pressed this down to meet that line, the top line, we're going to go ahead and give this a nice press just to make sure that it sticks and it gets nice and creased. So I'm going to do that. Then you take another piece of double-sided tape and you place it on the line that's left, or that's remaining, the second line you drew. So it'll look like this. You have one edge that's folded, one edge that's raw, and a piece of tape in the middle. Do not remove the backing of the tape just yet. We're going to leave that on. I also shared another tip in my YouTube channel for what to do if your tape has lost some stickiness, but just to refresh here, if your tape has lost its stickiness, place a pressing cloth over top of your piece that has the tape stuck to it, leave the backing on, and press down with your iron. This helps reactivate the sticky power, I call it, of the tape so that your tape will be sticky again. Again, make sure there's a pressing cloth between the tape and your iron so that you don't burn it. Okay, so the next step is to take your lining piece and mark your centers. I had already done that ahead of time before I started filming, just saves on a bit of time, but that's what she has you do next. So that's all the prep work. All the prep work is done. Now we get to go with the sewing. The next piece you need is your Slit Pocket piece M. Again, I've marked so I know what my pattern piece is. I have the center and the T. You're going to take this piece, and you're going to fold it in half so the long edges meet. Then you will pin along the top edge, just like that. You're going to sew this top edge, using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, just basting it together. Once you've done that, before I forget, when you folded it in half, you could press your fabric. I forgot to press, so I'm going to go press mine now, and I'm going to cut all my little threads off. So I'm going to press mine so it's nice and flat. So now that that's pressed, you need to take the piece, where is it? Slit Pocket trim piece, N. I had mine labeled with a piece of painter's tape. In the pattern, she also gives instructions for if you're using directional fabric or what you need to do with those pieces. So also in the pattern, she gives a couple of different options for if you're using bias tape or cotton, or if you're using vinyl or any other non-fraying material. I'm using vinyl, so I'm going to proceed with those instructions. So you then take your piece. As I said, I'm using vinyl, so I'm following the vinyl instructions. You're going to take your vinyl strip and mark the center point all the way down. Just like that. She has you place a piece of double-sided tape on either side of the line. So I will do that now. So now that I have my tape on either side of the line, just like that, I'm going to go ahead and remove the tape on one side. And then I'm going to line my top raw edge here with the line on my band or trim, just like that. I'm going to remove the other side of tape backing. And if you have any of these frayed edges, you can either tuck them in or trim them off. And then I'm just going to press this over, just like that. If you don't want to use double-sided tape and you feel confident enough to not, you can just mark it, the half mark, and use your clips just like this. Fold it over and use your clips to hold it in place if you feel confident enough to do that. Mine kind of went off centered a bit, so I'm going to shift it around. There's my trim. Again, depending on your level of confidence in sewing, you can skip using the double-sided tape. I know I did in my tester versions, I didn't use it, but the tape is there. If you don't have tape, another trick is to use some washable glue. Put the washable glue stick on. Allow it to dry before you stitch because that will gum up your needle. If you want to start stitching right away, what you can do is put a pressing cloth, if you're using vinyl, over top of your piece and then press it with your iron, and that'll help set and dry the glue. Now we're going to top stitch this trim just over 1/4 inch from the top edge. So this is your top edge. You're going to go just over 1/4 inch from the top edge. Trim your threads. And the top band is now on top of your slit pocket, just like that. So now that we've attached the trim to the top of the slit pocket, we need to attach this slit pocket to our lining main panel J. So this is my lining main panel J. As I said, I always mark what the pattern piece is called on the back side of my pattern piece. I went ahead and put the center markings with an erasable marking tool on the right side of my lining main panel. In the pattern, she gives instructions for measurements for where we're going to place the slit pocket. So you'll want to check and make sure that you're using the correct measurement for the size of bag that you're using. I'm doing the small, so I've used the small measurement. I've already marked my line. You're then going to take your slit pocket and line up the top edge with that line you drew. Use some clips to clip it in place along the sides. You can also use traditional pins if you prefer to help hold it in place. The next thing you're going to do is transfer this center line onto your slit pocket. You'll want to use something that you can easily brush off or erase later so that it's not seen when you're done stitching. Then you're going to measure with the measurement she gives you in the pattern. I'm going to go ahead and use my erasable marking tool here so that I can see the line a little bit more. You're going to use the measurements she gives in the pattern and measure as she instructs. Once you have all your lines drawn, just to quickly note, for the large, there are going to be different lines drawn. That's okay. Just make sure you're drawing the lines for the size of the bag that you're using. When you sew the slit pocket, you are going to top stitch first along the bottom edge here, using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I like to trim my threads. Then you're going to sew a second row of stitching as she shows in the pattern. You're going to start on the corner here. You're going to sew down the right hand edge across the bottom. You're going to stop when you get to this first line you drew, 1/8 of an inch away. You're going to stitch up 1/8 of an inch away from that line, then across one stitch, back down, so all the way across this bottom stitching. Again, stop 1/8 of an inch away from this line you drew, up, take one stitch, stitch back down the other side. Again, it'll be 1/8 of an inch away from this line, and back across, then back up. If when you're stitching, your stitching doesn't line up correctly or exactly to this bottom line of stitching you made, use a shorter stitch length to get to that exact spot, or you can hand crank to there and adjust. That way there you're stitching right on top of that line. When you're stitching, you're just going to stitch right until you meet the pocket trim. You're not going to stitch up onto the pocket trim, just below it. Turn. If you need to take 2 stitches here, take 2 stitches. Again, make sure you're stitching right on top of that line you made originally. When you get back up to the top here, you can backstitch over top of the trim, because this will be in your seam allowance. And that is how it will look when it's all stitched. So you've got a little extra opening here for pens, another pocket here, and another pocket here. I'm going to press this with my iron to get rid of the lines I made. There we go, that looks a little bit better. You can see it a little bit better. I went off here, but that's okay. It's at the bottom of the pocket. I'm not super concerned about it. And that is how that looks, front and back. If you're doing the large, she gives instructions for an X in this box here. I didn't do the large again, I'm doing the small. You can also add rivets in the centers here that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to punch it with my awl right in the center. Could use my rivet press, I guess. It'll be easier with the rivet press, so I'm going to use my rivet press to punch those holes. So you're going to use a press to punch the holes, or as you can see, I was using an awl. Again, you have the options to use Chicago screws or rivets, as I mentioned previously. You will also want to cut a piece of Peltex or Decaville Heavy, just for extra stability on the back of these rivets. I'm going to use some Peltex. The rivets installed at the top, that just gives some extra hold up here. If you don't use rivets, my suggestion would be to continue sewing up to the top here. If you're not using rivets or Chicago screws or don't have them, my suggestion would be to continue stitching up to you get this just above here, stop, and then stitch back down. That way there the top of your trim is not flimsy and it'll hold. That's just an option or a suggestion for you. So now that we are done with this, we can move on to our zipper pocket, or with the zipper overlay or your zipper facing. So depending on which option you chose, I'm doing a zipper overlay. You will grab that piece. So there is your zipper overlay. You will also need the remaining lining main panel piece. Place it right side up on your table. If you are doing the zipper overlay as I am, you will follow the instructions for the zipper overlay. If you are using the zipper facing, you will follow the instructions for the zipper facing. Because I'm doing the zipper overlay, that's what I'm going to show on here. So she has you run a bead of glue on the zipper overlay. I'm actually going to use some double-sided tape instead of glue. Just because filming, I don't have to wait for it to dry. If you have Beacon 3-in-1 glue, that is the glue you can use. So now we will mark the position of our zipper overlay. So that is wrong side down on the lining main panel. She has, again, different measurements for the large and the small. You'll use the measurements that correspond with the size you're making. I'm making the small, so that is the measurement I'm going with. You can then leave your ruler there, which will help make it nice and straight if you're worried about it being straight. You want to have this centered, so I'm going to first fold my lining main panel in half to create a crease. So I've made a crease. I'm going to do the same with my zipper overlay, create a crease, so that I can have them perfectly centered. You will then line up these creases that you make. And line it up with the line. So I have that on, centered, and on the line I drew. If you're using glue, you're going to want to let it dry. I use double-sided tape just for the purposes of this video. Now you're going to top stitch your overlay all the way around. You're top stitching around the outer edge of the overlay, just the outer edge now, so just around here right now. Leave long tails at the beginning and end, no back stitching. This just helps for how she ties it off. But if you want to back stitch and you're comfortable with that, you can go ahead and back stitch. You're top stitching this with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Then you're going to pull your threads through. So those long tails are getting pulled through. Now we're going to tie all these threads off. You're just going to knot them. I just knot them all together. You can trim these tails after or just leave them long. That's really up to you. I'm going to trim mine just a little bit. She also shows how to add a little bit of glue here so that they don't unfray. I'm not worried about it. I haven't had an issue with it, so I'm going to skip the glue for now. Now we need to cut this opening so that we can install our zipper. You're going to turn it so that your lining main panel is right side up. You can start with your seam ripper to start a hole, flip it over to the wrong side using your scissors. You want to cut this opening out. You want to make sure you're not cutting your zipper overlay, so duckbill scissors are good for this as well. So I'm just going to start cutting first just to get it going a bit more. All right, now with the duckbill scissors, what you want to do is cut that opening. Again, keep checking to make sure that you're not trimming your zipper overlay accidentally. This trimming doesn't have to be perfect because it is hidden. This is why duckbill scissors are good, because they hold the bottom fabric away from your scissors where you're cutting. So the duckbill rests on this and it keeps them separated. There's my opening. I'll cut. Again, as you're cutting, just check to make sure, even if you're using duckbill scissors, that you are not cutting your zipper overlay. Now we need to take the 8 1/4 inch zipper. So I will measure to make sure that's the one I am using. I am. She has you use glue, but again, for this, I'm going to use some double-sided tape just so that I don't have to wait for it to dry. Going to place the tape along the top edge of the zipper. You do this on both long edges of the zipper tape. Careful not to do what I just did, which was almost cut my finger. Then you're going to place the zipper so that it's centered in your hole, in the zipper pocket hole. So remove both sides of the double-sided tape covering, or tape, paper, sorry. You want to center this. Another thing is depending on which way you like your pocket to open when it's being worn, you'll want to orient your zipper so that it is facing that way. If you need to shift it around to make it fit a little bit better, now is the time to do that. That is how it'll look. If you're using glue, as she said in the instructions, you will leave it dry. She has you place heavy objects on top to help hold it down. Now, you're not stitching that on, it's just glued. You're going to take your zipper pocket piece L, just one of them. Flip your lining main panel over so it is wrong sides facing you. Your pocket panel, you are going to then take another piece of double-sided tape and place it just below the zipper here. Remove the tape, the protective backing, and then you will place your pocket lining just on top of the tape. So it will look like this. So your zipper pocket will be facing up off your fabric and just there. Then you're going to, well, you can, add some clips to help hold it in place, or some pins if you want. Then you're going to take this, turn it over, and you're going to start stitching 1/8 of an inch here on the bottom, and you're going to stitch across. No back stitching again. She has you do the same thing we did when we attached the zipper overlay, which was leave long tails and we pull them through and then tie it off in the end. So I'm going to stitch on the bottom of the zipper, just along here, using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. If you don't have a zipper foot or a skinny foot like I have, you can use your zipper foot. A zipper foot should be used when sewing zippers. Just helps get closer to the zipper. So you're going to start 1/8 of an inch right here. You're just going to start 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of the opening of your zipper overlay. So where this short edge is, you'll start 1/8 of an inch away from there. No back stitching. When you approach your zipper head, move the zipper head back out of your way. Leave your long tails. Now that I have that stitched, I'm going to turn this over. Oops. And I'm going to pull the tails through and I'm going to knot them, just like I did when I attached my zipper overlay. If you are comfortable or don't mind having the back stitching, you can go ahead and back stitch rather than doing this. This just gives a cleaner finish. It's really a personal preference. I normally don't mind so much, but for the video, I'm trying to follow exactly as she says in the pattern. Trim your threads. I like to leave little tails. And that piece is now complete. It is attached. That will be your pocket, bottom of the pocket. Now we need to attach our final zipper pocket piece. I'm going to pin this piece down just so that it doesn't get caught or shift when I'm sewing. You're going to repeat the process that you did to attach this lining pocket piece. Put a piece of tape just above the zipper tape. Sorry, just on the top edge, of the zipper tape is where you're placing your double-sided tape. pull the backing off, and line up your zipper pocket lining piece with the top edge of the zipper. You'll also want to line up the sides of your zipper pockets here too. So when you're placing it, make sure all your side edges all match up and that you match it up to the top. You're going to turn it over and finish stitching. Now that I've got that attached, I'm going to put the pin through both pieces here, just so that this piece doesn't shift on me when I'm stitching and get caught in my stitches above. Now, because we've stopped 1/8 of an inch from each edge, we're going to start here where our first set of stitches stopped, stitch up and then across and then down 1/8 of an inch. Again, you're leaving long tails, you're not back stitching. If you're comfortable with back stitching, please go ahead and do that. When you're getting close to the zipper head, just zip it up out of the way so you don't hit it. Clip it so that you have long tails. You're going to pull the tails again through the back side. Oops. Knot them. And then you'll trim your threads. The next step is to press the bottom edges of the pieces. Oh, so first, sorry, you're going to trim these so that they are even. I like to just use my erasable marking tool and I mark along, and then I'll just trim it with my scissors. You can go ahead and use a rotary cutter for this. And then they both line up. You're then going to take both the pieces and mark to the wrong side using the measurement she gives. Now, I will admit, I don't normally do this. I just leave it. It's just a personal preference. Then you want to press these to the wrong side with your iron. So I will do that. Now that they are pressed, we're going to stitch down the sides of our pocket, starting at the top, back stitching, going all the way down to the bottom, and back stitch when you reach the bottom. Move your lining out of the way because you don't want to be stitching your lining. So I like to clip it out of the way. This way here, I know I won't accidentally catch it in the pocket when I'm sewing it. You're going to sew the sides with either a 3/8 to 1/2 an inch seam allowance. And my pocket sides are sewn. I did it for both sides. They're both sewn. I'm going to clip my threads here. And the pocket is now complete. If you're using a zipper facing, you will follow the steps for how to sew your zipper facing and then installing the zipper pocket. She has those all written out in the pattern for you. Next, we are going to work on our exterior. So you need to take top band C and front center panel D. So here is my center panel D and my top band C. So as you'll notice, my rivets are already installed here. She has you install them in these steps going forward. I went ahead and did mine already before I started filming. So when we get to that step in the pattern, I won't be installing these, but I'll let you know when I get to that step. What you want to do is take your top band C, place it right sides together with your front center C. You're going to pin along the long edges, so they are right sides together. You're pinning along the long edge. I like to line up my center marks that I made. That way there I know everything is going to line up. You're going to sew the two pieces together with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay. You're going to fold the seam allowance toward the top band C and top stitch on the top band side. So we're going to be top stitching on this side. You can press this with your iron if you're using vinyl, cork, or faux leather, any of those non-fraying materials. You can't press them with an iron as it'll cause them to burn, so I just really like to press it with my hands. Make sure I get it pressed down really nice. I need to switch to a Teflon foot. If you don't have a Teflon foot, a walking foot, or some masking tape, painter's tape on the bottom of your presser foot will also help it glide and not stick to your vinyl. So we're top stitching. You need to change your length of your stitch to a longer stitch length. I like to use a 3mm stitch length for my top stitching. Some people use 3.5, some people use 4. It's personal preference. And you're stitching this 1/8 of an inch away from the folded edge. Clip your threads. Return your stitch length, and there is the finished top band attached to the front center and top stitched. Next, we're going to take our top zipper. That is the longest one, the one with the ends, one set of the ends turned and finished. She has you find which tooth is the first tooth on the zipper. So which one will be the first tooth that you see? Let me get this to focus better. So the first tooth would be the top tooth. That is this one here for me on the left side. So she has you mark that. I'm going to mark that with my Clover Choco, but it's not really working. So I'm just going to make a little snip on that side, just like that. Okay, so now we need the piece that has our top band. So these are front center D and front center C that are attached together, and our zipper tape. Again, I'm leaving my zipper pull attached just so that it's easier for me for this step, so that I don't accidentally get my zipper twisted. You need some double-sided tape. She has us take the double-sided tape and place it between the two marks that we made. So you're going to put it at the top edge. You can also skip this if you feel confident enough in your sewing and not use double-sided tape. If you prefer, for the video purposes, I am using double-sided tape. You'll peel back the paper backing and place your zipper starting at the first mark you made. So remember, there was two marks you made, the shorter mark, the one with the less amount between the mark and the edge, and the one with the mark is on this side. Line up the top edge. You really want to be careful lining this up so you don't get wavy zipper tape. Press it down onto the panel. Now this mark over here, on this side here, we want to transfer this mark onto the zipper tape. So we'll just move the zipper tape down a little bit and transfer the marking there. You can also use a few clips to help hold it in place if you're worried about your tape not holding. So you're going to stitch along on the zipper tape, starting from the edge here, going all along and basting it with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. A zipper foot is helpful here to make sure you can get an accurate 1/4 inch. So again, starting with the beginning of the zipper where it's folded, going all the way to this mark, and then you'll back stitch to lock in your stitches, and it's a 1/4 inch. there we go, I have it sewn. Next, you will take another piece of double-sided tape and place it along the zipper. Place it between the two marks, just like that. I've already installed my rivets, but this is where she has you install all your rivets. I've already installed mine and I've used a piece of Peltex behind, so I'm good to continue on to the next step. But if you're using rivets and you want to add them, you will do that now. Next, you will take your zipper tail and you will fold it down. You can use clips or a pin to hold it in place. There we go. That's how it'll look. Remove the paper, and then you will grab one of your lining main panels, the one with the slit pocket. So you want the one with the slit pocket, and you want to place this right sides together so that the zipper is sandwiched in between. So the right side of the lining is touching the wrong side of the zipper. You want to line up everything, all your edges. Again, this just helps so that you don't get a wavy zipper. You can use some clips here if you want to just help hold it in place. Just like that. So it's all clipped and pinned. Okay, so once you have this all pinned, you can also pin on the sides just to help hold it together. You're going to stitch this to your exterior panel using 5/16 of a seam allowance. So that is between 1/4 inch and 3/8 of an inch. You'll want to use your zipper foot or a narrow foot to make sure that you can get that accurate seam allowance. And you'll stitch from one end all the way across to the other end. Back stitching at start and stop. Go slowly so that you can stay as accurate as possible, or if you want, you can put a piece of masking tape or painter's tape and mark where the 5/16 of an inch is on your bed of your machine, just so that you know where to line up the edge of your fabric so you get an accurate seam allowance. So that's done for now. Next, we're going to take the back panel. We'll just put this off to the side. Next, we're going to take the back panel, which is F. This one here. Again, this one has your stabilizer attached to the panel. And your back pocket H, which is this one. You also need your zipper tape and your zipper tabs. So what you're going to do is take your exterior zipper tabs. You have 2 exterior and 2 lining. Place one exterior right side down, right sides together with the zipper tape. Clip it in place. Repeat this for the other side. You want to make sure you're lining up the long edges of the zipper tab with the zipper tape. Then you're going to take your lining, place it right sides together with the wrong side of the zipper tape. Again, lining up the long edges, just like that. So you have exterior together and the lining on the back. You'll then sew these with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then you're going to press these so they are wrong sides together, so the zipper tabs are wrong sides together. I like to put a pin or a clip. You can press them with your iron. I just give it a finger press. And then you're going to top stitch this zipper tab, both these edges here, with a 5/16 of an inch seam allowance. So again, that's between 1/4 of an inch and 3/8 of an inch. And then this is complete. You have your exterior and your lining tabs attached to your zipper. Now you're going to take your back pocket H, which is right here, place it right side up, put a piece of double-sided tape along the top edge, right up here. She gives measurements for where you should start and stop when placing the tape. So I'm going to mark those now. You'll then put the tape between those two marks that you made. Along the top edge. If you don't want to use double-sided tapes and again you feel comfortable with your sewing, you can just use clips here for this part that I'm doing. Remove the backing and place your zipper right sides together with the right side of the panel. Line up all your edges so they're nice and straight. It will look like that. If you just used clips, you could base this in place using a smaller seam allowance, so you could go with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance just to stitch this down, then you don't have the clips. Because I'm using tape, I don't really need to use the clips, it'll hold it down. But that's just an option if you don't want to use clips or tape. The next thing you're going to do is take your back pocket lining H, so this piece here, or no, not this piece, sorry. Where is it? Right here, your back pocket lining piece, and you're going to place this on top. She does recommend using double-sided tape. I'm not going to for this part because I don't feel I need it, but you can use the double-sided tape if you feel more secure using that. I line up, make sure my center marks are lined up as well. That just helps keep everything lined up and looking pretty when I'm sewing. And then that is secured with the clips. Now I'm going to sew all these layers together with a 5/16 of an inch seam allowance. Again, that's between 1/4 inch and 3/8 of an inch. Take your time, go slow. And we're sewing all the way across from edge to edge. When you get to this zipper head, you need to move it out of the way. Alright, so that's sewn. Cut your threads. Next we'll take them and we will turn this so they are wrong sides together. Oops. You can press this with your fingers or your iron. I'm going to press it with my iron. Try not to pull on your zipper tape. You don't want to make it wavy, so give it a press. Next we're going to top stitch this with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So you're going to top stitch along this edge with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Turn your threads, and that is what it'll look like once you've top stitched. Next you need to take your back panel G, which is right here. This is the one that we've put this piece of tape on in the middle and we folded this top edge down and attached it with some tape. You're going to take those and place it so that the bottom edge, the raw edge, is on top of the zipper tape. So right sides together. Clip it in place. You can also use tape here if you prefer your double-sided tape. And we will sew this as well with a 5/16 of an inch seam allowance once we have it all clipped. Now that we have that stitched on, you can go ahead and clip your threads. Next, we are going to take your back panel F, That is this one with your stabilizer attached to it. You're going to place it right side up and place the back panel H, that is this piece here. You remember we marked it. Back panel H on top, lining up the bottom edges. You want to get those all lined up. If any of your lining pocket panel is uneven, you can go ahead and trim it so that it's all the same width. Sometimes when we're sewing, it shifts a little bit, and that's okay. So we will line up the bottom edges and pin it in place. You'll also notice I used fleece for my bag. She gives options for different interfacings. I liked the feeling of the fleece when I made my tester versions. Still had a lot of structure in the bag, but just felt nice and slouchy-ish. So I've got it pinned like that. Okay, so you have it, once you have it all pinned, put one more pin there, we're going to baste around the side and bottom edges. So we'll go down, across, and back up with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to switch back to my regular sewing foot. Because we're basting, you can leave it at a longer stitch length. When you're doing basting stitches, you normally use a longer stitch length, or when you top stitch, you normally use a longer stitch length. Once you're done basting and top stitching, don't forget to return your stitch length back to the stitch length you usually use. So that is how it is looking so far. Next, we need to take our handles and straps and handles. There's only one handle. So your completed straps and handle. And these markings that we made previously are now important. We are going to be using them. Take one of your straps, top side down, and you're going to place the strap onto the back panel to the right of the rightmost mark that you drew. So the furthest marks, you're going to be placing it to the right. So I have my center mark, then I have another mark here, and then I have another mark here. I'm placing it there. I'm going to come closer to the camera just so you can see, and I'll explain it again. So there's my center mark. You can see my next mark here. So center, the next mark, and then my furthest most mark to the right. And I'm lining that up with that mark. So there's the one mark, the next mark, and then the third mark. And I'm lining it up with that, as well as lining it up with that line we drew going down, or going across the whole length of the panel. I clip this to the top, just like that. I'm going to sew the bottom short edge here of this strap onto the back panel using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. You can also remove your clips if you find you don't need them. Make sure your stitch length is back to the stitch length you used to sew. I like to back stitch here just for extra security. So now we have this one attached. You're now going to place your handle right beside where you've placed this strap, just like that. So here's my strap already attached. There's my handle. So they're right together, touching each other on the long edges. And I'm going to sew that one on the short edge. Now that's attached. You're going to take your handle, ensure you're not twisting it. So your fabric, or whatever side, you can do it with the vinyl side down, up, or the fabric up. Turn it so that it's not twisted and place it not on the center line, one line over, so you'll have a space between. And clip this. I'll show you what I'm doing so you can see. So there's my center mark. And then I have another mark here for the next measurement. So I'm lining this up not with the center mark, but with the next line to the left of the center. It's hard to see because I used black, I'm really sorry. But in the pattern, she actually has diagrams that show this, but so there's my center mark, and then there's my next mark, and I'm lining this up with the handle, the other end of the handle, up with that second line to the left, and with the line that we drew going across the whole panel. I'm going to stitch that down with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. If you're finding that your machine is having a hard time handling going through the stabilizer and all the bulk, try a bigger needle and a little bit of a longer stitch length. That often helps. Next, what you're going to do is take the remaining, so as you can see, sorry, I'm going to stop there. As you can see, my handle is not twisted. That's how it looks. So next we need the remaining strap. You're going to place it right beside the handle like you did before. And you're going to stitch that as well with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Again, I backstitch just for extra security. It's not needed. So I go back once and back over it. It's not needed, but I just like to do it just for extra hold. That is how it will look when you are finished. So you will have your 2 straps attached. They'll be hanging up off the top of the panel, and your handle. So this is the top, this is the bottom, the handles go up that way, and then the handle here. Again, it's not twisted. Next, what we need to do is measure. Where's my ruler? And make a line up from the first line we drew where we were lining these up. She tells you where in the pattern, how far up to measure. And you're drawing it up from the original line that you drew, going across the whole length of the panel. I like to check to make sure that this is going to cover them. If it doesn't, I can always move this down a bit. So I drew those lines. Now what she wants you to do is create an X through all of these. So you will start on this edge, you'll sew across, then you'll come down on an angle to this corner, then you'll go up, down on another angle, and back up. So a total of 5 rows of stitching. So across, come down on an angle, go up the side, down on another angle to this corner, and back up. You'll repeat that process for the second side. And there we go. We are all stitched. I'll show you the back. Doesn't need to look super pretty, but that's what the back looks like. And then the front. Next, we're going to remove this tape. Or the backing, sorry, not the tape, the backing of the tape. And then you're going to press the band up. And then we're going to stitch along this top edge. I find mine is not perfectly straight, so I'm going to adjust that. You're going to stitch along this top edge here using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. If your panel shifted, not to worry, trim the edge so that it's lined up. and that is how it will look. Something I forgot to do, I'm very sorry, before you stitch your handles and do the X, you're supposed to top stitch along here. I forgot to do that. Not to worry though, if you forget, you can always do it now. It won't change anything. Sorry about that, didn't mean to confuse you all, but I forgot to do that, so I've just done the top stitching there. So you'll have 2 rows of top stitching on this panel once your straps are attached and you've folded this up. Now we are going to take these, and what I like to do with the straps, because they're so long, is I like to tuck them down into the pocket. This way here, they're out of the way. Just like that, and my handle I will take and clip it to one of the straps just so that it's out of the way and I don't have to worry about fussing with it. You will then take your zipper. So again, I kept mine attached. Yours will not be attached, but you can still do it this way if you prefer, leaving the zipper attached just to ensure that you don't accidentally turn it the wrong way. So my zipper pull is still attached to my zipper. You're going to attach the opposite side of your zipper to the remaining exterior panel that we just worked on. You're going to use a piece of double-sided tape. Same thing between the 2 marks that you made. When I'm using my double-sided tape, I like to fold the beginning edge down just a little bit so that when I pull it back, this has no tape here, it's all here, and this is easier to pull off when I'm taping something. So you see this piece is loose. That's why my pieces always look like the tape is longer than the line. It's not, it's lined up with the line. I just fold that back a bit. The tape sticks to itself and it gives me a little bit of extra, like a tab to grab onto when I pull the tape backing off. Just a trick I thought I'd share. You're only going up to those lines, again, that we drew. You're going to attach the zipper. So remove the tape backing. Oops. And place the zipper between the 2 marks. So the zipper will be wrong side up, so right sides together with the panel. So if my zipper was closed, it would be exactly like this, wrong side up, the curved edge that we folded in will be there. And now, because I know I'm doing this correctly, I'm going to take off my pull and remove this panel. So again, that curved edge, or the edge where we folded in the zipper, so it has a clean finished edge, is opposite of the other panel. You want to make sure you're lining up everything nicely so you don't get a wavy zipper. You'll mark, transfer the mark that you made on this panel here to the zipper, so you know where to start and stop. This is obvious, this end you're going to stop when you reach the end of the zipper tape, but know where to start here. And you're going to sew this on with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Change to your zipper foot and go back to your regular stitch length if you've changed your stitch length. Back stitch at start and stop. Alright, so that is now attached. Now we need to attach our lining main panel. Same thing again, you can attach some tape just to hold it in place. Again, I fold my tape back a little bit so I get like a little tab. And you're just taping it between the marks. remove the backing of the tape. So see how I made a little tab here? It's easy to just pull the tape off. Sometimes I forget to make that little tab, but it's easy to pull it off. Then you're going to line up. Oh, before you do that, we have to pin the zipper down. Sorry, I almost forgot to do that. So you're going to pin your zipper so that it's on an angle. So you take your zipper and fold it down. It's going to look like a little triangle when you fold it down. Pin it so it doesn't shift, or clip it in place. Oops. There we go. So it looks like it's on a little triangle right here. Stick your lining panel right sides together with the wrong side of the zipper. Make sure you're lining up all the edges nicely. It may feel a bit awkward because the handle and the straps kind of push things around. Just do your best. Be patient and line it up. Don't rush. Alright, so you can also clip the sides where there is no tape. This just helps hold everything in place for you. And we will sew this with a 5/16 of an inch seam allowance, same thing as before, between 3/8 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. If your seam allowance went off, like mine did a little bit, you can go back and re-stitch. That's the beauty of this. If there's any mistakes, you can always fix it. So I stitched that together. Remove my pins or my clips. Remove these from the zipper tape. I'm still going to leave my handle tucked into my tucked into my pocket. My straps, I mean, tucked into my pocket. I just feel that it's better there. Now we need to attach our bottom to our bag. So take your panel that has the panel D and C, I have to keep looking to make sure I call them the right name, and your back panel, or bottom, sorry. You're going to take these pieces and you're going to place your bottom piece onto the front exterior, right sides together. You're going to line up the straight edge of the bottom piece to the straight edge of your center panel. When you're doing this, you want to make sure you're not attaching this side with your rectangle rings, because this needs to be on the back of the bag. So the side that you will be attaching to your center panel will be the side that does not have the rectangle rings near the edge. So this side with nothing on it. So you're going to clip that in place. If you have center marks, you can line up your center marks too to make sure that everything is lined up nicely and neatly. You're going to sew these two pieces together with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I've already drawn, as we did previously at the beginning during the prep work, I've already drawn that line, so that makes it easy for you to see where you have to sew. You're going to press the seam allowance towards the bottom piece and top stitch this bottom piece. You're going to top stitch it 1/8 of an inch away from the seam here on the bottom piece. I'm using vinyl, so I can't press with an iron, so I have to press with my hands. If you're using cotton or anything else, you can go ahead and press this with your iron. Okay, now that is top stitched on the bottom panel. We're now going to repeat that process for the opposite side. So for the remaining exterior panel, I mean. I'm going to just shift this to make sure my straps and handles don't get in the way. Not handles, don't get in the way. I'm going to remove my label, what this is called. There we go. So you're going to want to make sure you move your, I'm going to unpin this, turn your rectangle rings down towards this short side here, because if they're up here, you have a chance of hitting them accidentally when you're sewing. You don't want to hit that with your needle, so I turn them so that they are facing away. Again, line up your center marks. And we're going to sew this as well with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. You'll repeat the same process of pressing this towards the bottom panel and top stitching through the bottom panel with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And now we have, as you can see, one long piece with your lining, your exterior, your bottom, your back exterior, or front exterior, sorry, and your lining again. If you have a logo, she says this is where, or a metal tag, this is where you can attach it now. I'm going to attach one. She gives the measurements for where to attach it. You'll need your metal logo, and then I like to use a scrap piece of Peltex behind. You'll want this centered, so you'll need to find the center. You don't have to place it centered if you don't want. You can have it off to the side. Just keep in mind that where these cutouts are where the box corner is, so don't go over to the edge here. Try to stay over this way. I think that's what I'll do for this, just to be different, so that it's not perfectly centered. I'll use my seam ripper to rip these holes. If you were using cotton on your bottom panel, you would want to make, or to use fray check to stop it from fraying. And I lost my piece of Peltex. Interesting. It grew legs and walked away. Okay, that's really, oh, there it is. Somehow ended up in my clip bin. So make the marks on your Peltex, cut them out with your seam ripper, just like that. And now I will attach my tag. So when you're attaching the tag, you want to make sure you orient it so that it is the correct way, so you don't want to have it upside down. So this is the top where the zipper is. My label says handmade. When I read it, I'm going to push the Peltex through the prongs. And then the metal washer. And push the prongs in towards each other. Another little thing I like to do, just for extra security, so that the prongs don't rip through to my lining, is place a piece of tape over top of the prongs. This just helps keep them from pushing through. And then that's how it looks. So here's my corner where my boxed corners will be, and there's my tag there. So not perfectly centered, just something different. A little fun. we're getting into the final stages. Now we need to sew up the sides. So, fold the entire piece so it's right sides together. Your exterior pieces should be lined up. So that means where your zipper is. So the key spots you want to clip together are the seam where the lining and exterior meet. So you want to make sure you clip there. The seams where the bottom and exterior meet. So down here where your bottom is and where it meets the exterior. So here, this part here, and this part, you want these two seams to meet up. You want to clip it there. You don't want this to shift. Now this can be a bit bulky here because we have our side connectors. This is where you can switch to a bigger needle. It will help for sewing so that you don't get skip stitches in that area. Another thing you want to do is maybe put some pins so that your zipper tail that's left hanging stays out of the way of your seam. So don't put the pin so it goes in through the side because you'll naturally sew over the zipper, or the pin I mean. Put it so that it goes straight up and down, like that. You can see them, they're straight up and down. Again, pinning those seams that need the extra attention. Make sure your zipper pocket is open. The bottom corners of the lining you also want to make sure are lined up. If you prefer not to use pins to hold your zipper tails, you can also tape them as she's done in the pattern. I'm just going to use a few more clips around these seams where we don't want any shifting. Once it's all pinned, you're going to position the bag onto your machine and sew up the entire right side of the bag. Make sure your zipper tails and everything are not in the way. So you're going to start 1 inch up from this seam where the lining and the exterior meet. So you're starting on the lining 1 inch above the exterior. And you're sewing this with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now you want to flip over and repeat that process for the other side, the left side of the bag. I'm going to stop right there because it's really tight where my zipper is there. I'm going to switch to my narrow foot. You can also use a zipper foot for this step, just to help get closer and get a more accurate seam allowance at the top where that zipper is. So now that we've sewn the exteriors, we're going to flip the whole bag and we're going to sew the lining. We're going to start sewing where we started when we sewed the exterior, and you want to increase gradually to a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. You want to do this within the next 1 to 2 inches of length and continue to the end of the lining with a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Flip and repeat that for the other side. to, and as she says in the pattern, is to re-stitch along this stitch line 1/16 of an inch away from the first one on the inside of the seam allowance, so to this side. That's just an extra reinforcement of the seam. It just helps give it strength. And I also like to make sure I go over where the zipper is. So where the zipper and the exterior panel are sewn together, I like to go over that area a few times just to be sure that it's locked in and nothing comes apart. Go back and stitch over where the side connectors are. So now that our lining and our exteriors are all sewn and we've done the second row of stitching, we need to mark our box corners. She gives the measurements in the pattern for the box corners, so depending on what size of bag you're making, you'll use the measurements she gives in the pattern. So I'm going to go ahead and mark for the small size. You'll want to trim these boxes, but before I do that, just a little tip. I like to go back over my stitching and back stitch over it. This just helps lock in those stitches so that they don't come undone as you're manipulating the bag. So I just back stitch a couple times over that seam. Now I'll go ahead and cut my box corners now that my stitches are locked in and I don't have to worry about it coming undone. Okay, so my corners are cut out. That's how your corners will look. If you're making a small as well, if you're making a large, they may look a little bit different than this. Now we will trim our seam allowances. For my lining, I like to use pinking shears. My exterior, if I'm using cotton, I'll also use pinking shears. If not, I'll go ahead and use my regular scissors. This just helps prevent fraying. There's a lot of bulk, so sometimes I find I have a hard time cutting through it with my pinking shears, so then I switch to my regular scissors. As long as you get that seam allowance trimmed, that's all that matters, because you're reducing the bulk by trimming your seam allowances. Now we are going to box our corners. So you'll take your exterior and fold the raw edges so they meet, just like that. Place some clips to hold it in place. I pin both sides now so that I don't have to do one side after. I just get it done and I can stitch both sides right away. I also like to place clips a little bit down from the sides of where I've boxed my corner, just to help hold it. You're going to sew these box corners with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. You'll also do a second row of stitching on these like we did with the sides. I like to trim my seam allowance down in the corners just so that when I turn the bag right side out, I don't have so much bulk in the corner. Just like that, and that's how it looks when you have finished boxing those corners. So now that we have our corners boxed and our sides all sewn, we need to pull the lining partially out of the bag, but first where I had the zipper pinned, the zipper tail, I'm going to remove those pins so I don't accidentally poke myself with them. So I'm just going to push this out a bit so it exposes where the zipper tail is and the pins were. And then I'm going to push my lining down so it reveals the top of the bag. Try not to pull on your zipper while so take your time. I'm also going to make sure I pull my zipper pocket down so that it is not up near the top of the bag. I'm pressing this as much as I can with my fingers because I used vinyl. I can't press with my iron, but if you used cotton, you can go ahead and press this now with your iron. Being careful to get everything nice and flat, or as flat as I can. Okay, so her method for top stitching is a bit different than what you're going to be used to. Normally we just back stitch, and you can go ahead and back stitch if that's what you're comfortable with. But for her video, she has us leave long tails and then we sew them in after. So I will show you how to do that. Another thing you want to do before you start stitching is check your bobbin, make sure your bobbin is full. I just changed mine, so I know it's nice and full. I'm going to also push my handle and strap back down inside the bag so that they're not in the way. So when you're sewing, you're going to start sewing where the zipper tails come out of the bag. You're not going to back stitch. You're just going to start with your needle down and stitch along. If you have an extension table, go ahead and put it on now if you feel like you need it. If you think you can do this without the extension table, go ahead and continue stitching or top stitching the way you normally would. So we're starting to stitch right where the tails come out. I've got long thread tails here. And you're going to top stitch around the entire bag. You're going to go right back to where you started, right back in that needle hole. If you can't get right back into the same hole, shorten your stitch length so that you can. You're going to leave long tails again. So you're now going to take a needle. This is going to be hard to show on camera. I have a harder time with sewing with a needle. I don't have all the strength in my hands to be able to hold a needle as well, but she gives all the instructions. So you're going to take these threads and pull them up through the seams. So the seam where the lining and the exterior meet is where you're going to pull these threads through. If you're more comfortable, again, you can absolutely back stitch if you prefer. So pull each thread up through the seam where the exterior and lining meet. So it'll come out the top. You'll do this on the lining and the exterior for the threads on both sides. All right, once you get them pulled through this seam here, you will knot them together. So I like to take the lining and separate them from the exterior threads. And tie the exterior and the lining together. Right, knot it good. once I have them knotted, I like to trim them so all the threads are the same length. Not too much though, you want to make sure you still have nice long tails. Once you have it knotted like that, it's hard to see, but once you have it knotted so they come out this seam here, and I have a knot right there, you're going to thread them onto your needle again. She has you come out the side seam, but I'm going to go right back into the lining. So in between the exterior, where the exterior and lining meet. And instead of coming out that side seam, I turn my lining, pull my lining a bit so that it exposes where the needle is. So you can see my needle is coming out here, and I pull these threads through just like that. And what I do just for extra reinforcement is I will tie a knot just to make sure that this doesn't pull through again. As I said, she has you do it through the seam. I'm doing it this way just so I don't have to worry about cutting this thread. It's there and you won't see anything. And then that's it. There's no back stitching, no nothing on my bag because we stitched it the way she said. My seams, my lining didn't really, my stitching didn't really line up here, but that's okay. But you don't have any back stitching. Usually it would look a little bit nicer if I got that actually lined up. Now we need to turn the bag right side out. Take your time doing this. Try to push instead of pull so you don't damage anything. Poke out all your corners. I pulled my straps out of my pockets. They don't need to be in there anymore. So we are almost done here. Now what you need to do is, now that the bag is turned right side out, you're going to pull the lining through the pocket opening, just like that. So it's pulled through my pocket opening. You're going to line up and clip the bottom edge. So clip it in place, the whole bottom edge that was left unsewn. Line up your center marks and your corners. So you're going to sew the bottom edge with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Second row of stitching, just like we did for the sides and exterior of the bag. Now you need to box the corners. You can also trim this seam allowance if you want. I'm going to do that. Alright, now we need to box the corners the same way we did for the exterior corners, except for this time you have the bottom seam and the side seam. So what you want to do is line those up. So you have your bottom seam and your side seam. Line them up. The bulk where the seam allowance is, press one way and one the other to nest them. Repeat that for the opposite side, so nest your seams so that they line up. And then you will also stitch this with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So to reinforce again, 1/16 of an inch away. Trim those seam allowances. Again, this just reduces the bulk. push the lining main panel into the exterior, so you're pushing it back down. Flatten it out. Push out all your corners. You can reach in through your zipper pocket opening and push out these corners here. Really nice, your bottom corners. If you find they're not pushing out and you're not getting really nice bottom corners, pull your exterior out through the pocket opening and trim it a little bit more. Now we will sew the bottom of the pocket closed. So you've already turned the seam under. You'll just want to pin these to hold it in place. Once you snip all your threads, you can push your pocket back into itself. I'm going to take and put away my extension table. Now we are almost done. This is the exciting part. You can see your bag starting, or well, you can already see the shape of your bag. This is the small. I'm really happy with how it's looking so far. So now we need to add the zipper pull onto the zipper. She walks you through how to do this in the pattern. I use my zipper helper. Again, I will link it in the description, my video for how I use my zipper helper. There we go. So the zipper pull is on. Now you will install your zipper end. So what you do for this is you fold the end of your zipper tape like this. So fold it down or under the zipper teeth, the one raw edge or side edge, and then fold the other one under the zipper teeth so it looks like this. Use a clip just to hold everything. I like to use some glue inside my zipper end. So I put a bit of Beacon 3-in-1 glue inside my zipper end. This just helps hold it. So if the screw does ever come out, this will help actually keep it on the zipper. You don't have to worry, but it also helps glue the zipper, the screw in place as well. I find it helps hold it. I've tried to take them apart after I've glued them, and I find that they're really stuck and they don't come apart. Another thing, don't screw it with this in your hand like that. I've done this and my screwdriver slips and I've stabbed my hand. So put it on your table and screw it in that way so that you don't hurt yourself. My zipper end is installed. That's what it looks like. Okay, so now we need to mark the holes on our strap. She gives the measurement in the pattern for where to place these holes. So you'll use those measurements. You'll do this on both straps. If you don't have rivets, you can use Chicago screws, or you can sew these down so that they don't come apart. Now we will take our slider. We also need our hole punch. So I'm going to grab up my punch, or my press, and I'm going to punch those holes. You're going to punch the hole right where you marked. Now you will take your slider, one of your sliders, you will push the strap through the slider on one side. So I like to move my bar so that it's like this, right against this edge. Then I push the bar back against the strap, feed it back through. Then you'll come down your rectangle ring. So you'll come down, you'll move the slider so you have enough room. There's your rectangle ring. Make sure your strap is not twisted. So mine's not twisted. I'm going to feed it through my rectangle ring like that. You want some room between your slider and your strap. Again, with my bar, I push it so it's against the strap here. So my bar is against the bottom strap, the strap that's closest to my palm of my hand. I feed my strap through, push the bar against the side of the strap that I just fed through, and down back around the bar of the slider. You want to line up those holes you made. If you need to, you can take your awl and punch them out a little bit more, but you want to line up those holes so that you can put a rivet through it. So push your rivet through the hole and then through the second hole, so both sides of the strap, and then put the cap on it. And then you'll repeat that same process again for the other slider and the other strap. So again, one more time, here's my slider. I let my bar fall down close to this side, feed my strap through, push the bar against the strap, hold it, feed the strap through that side, pull it up a bit, make sure my strap is not twisted, feed my strap through my rectangle ring like that. Then you're going to repeat the same process with the up, over. Give yourself some slack here. So press the bar down towards the strap. Then you'll press the bar against the side of the strap that you just fed through. And install your rivet. If you want to make sure that it's done right, you can try it now and make sure that you can adjust. This way here, you're not pressing your rivets together. So mine, I have them so that both sides, if you can see, are against the back where it comes over. They're against the back of the bag, just like this. I don't know if I can get that so you can see. Okay, so just so that they're against the back of the bag. Just a personal preference on how I do that. If you can't use rivets, excuse me, if you can't use rivets because you don't have them or you don't have Chicago screws, when you feed this through, you would sew a line of stitching 1/8 of an inch away from this edge, and then you would sew another line of stitching again as close as you can to the hardware. Backstitch over it a few times just to really secure it. Again, 1/8 of an inch away from this edge, and then as close to the hardware as you can. And that'll help secure it in place. And now your bag is complete. We have completed our Yasmina backpack. We have a back exterior zipper pocket, perfect to hold your phone, keeps it nice and safe and against your body. We also have lining slit pockets, lining zipper pocket. The lining is nice and roomy. We've installed hardware, for example, zipper ends, rivets up here if you chose to add them, a bag logo, more rivets on the side connectors, sliders, and rectangle rings. I hope you enjoyed this video tutorial and maybe picked up some tips and tricks along the way. If you have any questions, please ask them in the comment section below and I will reply. If you need to get a hold of the designer Andrea for this pattern, she links her email as well as the Facebook group in the pattern. You can contact her that way. I look forward to seeing all the bags made with this video tutorial and hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.